Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and today we're talking about the Infinity Gems and the various supervillainesses that keep trying to steal them. But before we get into that, smash like, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell, and leave a comment. We've got a great community here, and it's all thanks to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. With all that said, let's dive in. The prologue to this one takes place in a region of Mexico known as Casa de Lamport. The Red King came here in the 1600s, along with his son, William Lamport, and his girlfriend, Rosa. Together, they discovered one of the fountains of youth. The Red King bought this property and the surrounding land, and it was named after William Lamport, who lived here for many years before he gave his life fighting the good fight. The area around the fountain was dug out. The natural wellspring itself and the rock formation it flowed out of were not disturbed, and instead, they became the center of an enormous outdoor swimming pool. The waters from this particular fountain of youth filled the pool, and in the 1920s, vast sprawling mansion was built next to the pool. The Red King was a philanderer, of course, and in Hollywood, that was so commonplace nobody would bat an eye at it. Hollywood was full of beautiful women who were all trying to turn their natural good looks into fame and fortune. And as they aged and their looks began to fade, the Red King would invite them to Casa de Lamport. They understood that the Fountain of Youth gave them what they wanted as long as they bathed in its waters on a regular basis. If they left, they'd just start aging again. So for many, this became their new home, and the mansion was huge enough that there was always plenty of room. In the autumn of 1943, a wealthy debutante named Priscilla Rich became the supervillain known as the Cheetah. She was ridiculously beautiful, and she was one of the many young women who were afraid to lose their looks. So when she heard other women in Hollywood mention the Red King and how a weekend spent with him seemed to get rid of wrinkles, she sought him out. In a way, honestly, this was a form of prostitution, and the payment was youth. And the girls who took the trips were keenly aware of this fact. One weekend, while in Mexico, Priscilla Rich is out gathering fruit from the fruit trees that grew in the nearby jungle when she encounters an old cheetah woman named Ixchel, who turns out to be the Mayan goddess of fertility and procreation. Ixchel looks like an old woman, and she's searching for the Fountain of Youth. But this region is cloaked and is nearly impossible to detect unless you've been brought there before. As such, Priscilla takes Ixchel back with her to the Fountain of Youth. And in return, Ixchel turns Priscilla into a were cheetah, granting her super speed, regeneration, claws, etc. Cheetah then uses her new super speed to steal jewelry from the various aging starlets who visit Casa de Lamport. One day, the Red King returns to his home after a long time of being away. On this particular visit, he brings with him the villain known as Poison Ivy, who wanted to see the jungle that surrounded his property on all sides. And he also brings with him Namora, who's a former queen of Atlantis who used to attack the surface dwellers during World War II. And she has an interest in all things water. So she wanted to see the fountain. While they are here, Priscilla sees the Infinity Gems for the very first time. She's never seen such large gemstones. So that night, she gets close to the Red King and tries to steal them from him. But now that he's crossed the line into full-on villain territory, the Red King uses the Infinity Gems, specifically the Mind Gem and Soul Gem, to change the motivation on her character sheet. First edition DC Heroes, by the way, actually had rules for this. They had a skill called Spy that does not appear in later editions. And the Spy sub skills were brainwashing, coding, connoisseur, and photo interpretation. And of these four, the relevant one is, of course, brainwashing. Brainwashing enables a character to change a target's motivation or beliefs. The target character's intelligence is the opposing value, and their willpower is the resistance value. The target character's mind APs are reduced by the resulting APs of the brainwashing attempt. When the mind has been reduced to 0 or less, the new motivation or belief may be programmed into the character. The subsequent APs of brainwashing build up the target's mind to a maximum of its original level. So basically, the Red King uses this to force Cheetah to never take any action against him ever again. Which brings us to the main plot, which takes place back at the Hellfire Club in New York City. The Red King gets back from his trip to Mexico, and not long after he's back, Princess Ravana Lexus Renslayer shows up. Sometimes she goes by the name Temptress, sometimes she goes by the name Terminatrix, sometimes she's the love interest of Kang the Conqueror, sometimes she hates him. She's complicated. But no matter how you slice it, she's a time traveler from one of many possible futures, and as such, she can recruit henchmen from any time period. So with her today is the female version of the Parasite, aka Alexandra Alston, who can absorb the abilities of others. So without wasting any time, the Parasite grabs the Red King. And while the Power Gem raises his strength and body to level infinity, the Mind Gem raises his mental attributes, the Soul Gem raises his bottom row of attributes, nothing seems to raise his dexterity. So he still has the exact same dexterity as Superman. And we decided to give her the same character sheet as her brother, the normal male version of Parasite, since we had stats for him, but not for her. And at any rate, so Parasite can latch on to Superman fairly easily, and that's exactly what we get here. Once Alexandra has a hold of him, she then tries to absorb his attributes. She has adaptation 80, mind drain 20, power drain 30, spiritual drain 30, and vampirism 20. That's Parasite's character sheet from first edition DC. So she uses her 80 APs of adaptation to mimic 80 APs of omni power. He has more than 80 APs, but she can't go any higher than 80. As for Mind Drain, it's her 20 APs versus his infinite APs. So she would literally have to roll infinity on 2d10, which is, of course, impossible. So that attempt fails. Same for spiritual drain and vampirism. And in the case of either the male Parasite or his sister, the female Parasite, both of them need to be touching their victim for these attacks to be attempted. Which brings us to the Valentino effect. Parasite is all over the Red King. At this point, her plan is to cuddle up to him, become the more powerful of the two characters, and then basically keep him as a cherished pet. Spiral, the six-armed servant of Mojo, comes from another point in the time-space continuum called Mojo World. She pledged loyalty to Ravana the Terminatrix, but that was a lie, something that Spiral said so she could get close to the Infinity Gems. Her plan was to teleport them back to Mojo World with her, which is not only another point in time, but another dimension as well. And taking the Infinity Gems to another dimension would depower them. But Spiral doesn't know that. So she is just one automatic action away from doing this when the Valentino effect hits her. So the Valentino effect is said to make the target, quote unquote, throw themselves at the feet of the user. But it also says that if two targets are affected, then they will, quote unquote, try to fight each other to the death unless checked. So our interpretation of that is when Parasite is hugging the Red King, Spiral then uses her dimension travel as an automatic action to take Parasite to Mojo World. Then she says, stay away from my man, which I thought was funny. And then she returns to the Earth K dimension. She then tries to grab the Red King, but that would be a grapple attempt, technically, and she's out of actions. Ravana, the Terminatrix, sees this, and she's also affected by the Valentino effect advantage. And she, too, is now pitted against the very villains that she recruited to assist her. So Ravana uses the time travel power to transport the Red King and herself back to her home in the 40th century. Thankfully, this doesn't involve dimension travel, so the Infinity Gems still work at this point. So here in the 40th century, the Red King uses the brainwashing skill again, this time bending Ravana to his will. The DC Heroes RPG had a book about Darkseid called The Four Horsemen of Apocalypse, and in it, the horsemen all had the same motivation, which was, quote unquote, controlled by Darkseid, which I always thought was interesting because the main rule book for DC Heroes only gives you a handful of choices, and none of them are that motivation. Anyway, so we decided to base this on that book. And as such, the Red King replaces her former motivation with the new motivation of controlled by Red King. And now that he's in the 40th century and out of harm's way, the nice part was that it gave him some time to think. So he comes up with a plan. He has Ravana take him back to the 20th century, but they don't travel to the moment they left. Instead, they go just a little bit into the future where he uses his powers to have the Infinity Gems retract their roots from the bones in his hands. Then he uses the Omni power of the Infinity Gems to heal his hands. Then he hides them. Having done that, then they go back in time to fight with the others because he's worried that it's way too easy for Spiral to teleport him to another dimension and kill the gems. And that's what he doesn't want. So at any rate, when he gets there, Spiral has gone. It is no longer her turn. So then he knocks her out to take her out of play. And no sooner than he does that, Parasite returns using that 80 APs of Omni power she has now. She subs it for dimension travel. So once her turn is up, he uses brainwashing on her too, which is something, by the way, he can do without the Infinity Gems. He's better with the Infinity Gems, but without them, he still has the brainwashing skill linked to its link attribute. So that means it's at level 25. While, meanwhile, her intelligence is 4, her willpower is 5, and her mind is 3. So changing the female parasite's motivation to controlled by Red King is effortless, basically. And then when Spiral wakes up, it's more of the same. So for now, the Red King still has the gems, but that was kind of a close one, if you think about it. And it's becoming more and more frequent that villains are coming for them. And that brings us to the epilogue. Lady Death travels to the Hellfire Club, where she tries to seduce the Red King and take the Infinity Gems for herself. But as we said before, the Mind Gem boosts his mind attribute to level infinity, and the Soul Gem boosts his spirit attribute to level infinity. So for her attempt to succeed, she would have to roll infinity or better on 2d10, which is impossible, obviously. And by the way, the girl who played Lady Death was named Lisa, and she did such a good job of playing her. You would think that she was like an actual actress, but she wasn't. She was just a college student. We played that portion of this back when I was in college around 1995 or so, maybe 1996, I'm not sure. And Lisa was really interesting because she was actually built like Lady Death. Specifically, what I mean is that she had a medical condition called gigantomastia, which means she was basically exceptionally buxom, right? Um, and then she had like the reddest of red hair ever. And she was extremely pale. So, between Lady Death's shape and her kind of like white skin, you know what I mean? She associated with her, right? And so the interesting thing was in Lisa's case, because of the way she looked, she was actually sort of introverted because of that. Like she was very shy. She was very quiet. She wore a lot of baggy shirts to try to like hide herself, that sort of thing. Um, which for a lot of us blew our minds because she was beautiful. You know what I mean? And at any rate, so when she played Lady Death, I think that the fantasy for her was then she was playing a character that was very extroverted and extremely confident and that sort of thing. And she loved the idea that Lady Death wasn't ashamed of how she looked. And instead she'd wear like those black bikini things and stuff like that. And she would like kind of own it. And so Lisa made Lady Death one of the most beloved characters in our game of all time. I never saw Lisa again after college was over. I have no idea what part of the country she lives in now. But to this day, I'm actually kind of a Lady Death fan thanks to her portrayal of the character. In the game, her Lady Death was had kind of the opposite character arc of the Red King, actually, where she pretty much starts off like chaotic evil, and then she slowly becomes more and more good as the game went on. So that in the end, Lisa's version of Lady Death actually had like a very heroic motivation. Anyways, I'm getting way ahead of myself. That is literally a story for another day. Um, I thought the fight with Parasite and Spiral was interesting myself. To me, it felt like we got very, very close to killing the Infinity Gauntlet in this adventure. Um, and I like Ravana the Terminatrix too. I first saw her in the Avengers, the Terminatrix Objective issue number 1. And in fact, I think that was the first Avengers comic book that I ever bought. But at any rate, so it was nice to have her in an adventure. So I enjoyed myself. I hope that you guys enjoyed hearing about this one. If so, as always, smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and leave us a comment, as that really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. And we just love hearing from you guys. So, from all of us here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope all of you guys have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.